My guest today has known me longer than any other previous guest, perhaps because she's my sister. A former psychology professor, she became a TikTok celebrity during the pandemic, making videos focusing on academic humor under the handle Professor Bren. Now she works as a UX researcher in Denver. When she's not doing whatever UX researchers do, she is either fixing random bullshit around her house, spending time with my poorly behaved sister-in-law Emily, or playing with her cats. She also has a bit of experience playing music. She's a songwriter, trumpetist, drummer, and guitar player. Please welcome to the podcast, Dr. Rachel Brenner.
Hey, Dove. Happy to be here.
I am happy to have you. Is that what it's called? A person who plays trumpet. Are they a trumpetist or a trumpeter? Did I get it right? Do you know? Did
I
I put you on
should
the
know.
spot?
Oh my gosh. Sorry, Mr. Gillen. I don't know. Trump
What was his
trumpeteer,
what was your band director in high school's name?
Richard Gillen, Mr.
Ri-
Gillen.
Richard Gillen. He's the
Yeah.
goat, right?
Oh yeah. He was like the our marching band director too, which in retrospect isn't the coolest hobby, but if you could
Oh,
be
it
badass
was
at something
cool.
nerdy, yeah.
It was cool. And didn't you get like rookie of the year when you were ninth grade for marching band?
I did. I did. That felt really good.
Can you
Yeah.
tell our listeners what that move was that you were known for within the Hudson Valley? What was that?
Yeah. So there was like a part in so my freshman year in the show where we all kind of stop and just play this uh intense part where we're supposed to kind of just be playing our hearts out. And they even told us to kind of move and like bop up and down a little bit. And Mr. Gillen was like, you should get really into it. Like you all are just like sticks out there, really get, break it down. My back is double jointed. So on like the last like note that we belled out, I just bent as far back as possible. And he was like, who are you? And, oh, I'm Rachel Brenner. I hadn't even, it was like still summer camp. I think I
Yeah.
hadn't even met him yet. So that was where I got and then he was like, everyone watch her.
What was the name of that move though? Was it was it like
Was there
Park
a
and
name?
Bark or something?
Oh my gosh, your memory is ridiculous. That's right. How did you know that? This kid.
You know the answer to that.
Yeah.
Um,
Where's
but
Michael? But yeah,
yeah,
the
but
park
anyway,
and bark. That's so funny. What
yeah,
a nerdy little. I
that
love
was
that.
legendary. I still love that picture of you. Do you still have that picture of you doing the Park and Bark?
Somewhere.
It was in Softa and Zeta's uh living room, I think. I remember it was either there or it was like grandma and grandpa's. So one set of grandparents. But anyways, well, let's get away from the marching band music, the high school band music, and I always start every episode when I have a new guest asking these three questions. So we'll start. I think I know the answer to this, but we'll see. What music have you been listening to recently?
I know you think I'm gonna say Taylor Swift.
Times
Um,
Person of the Year, apparently.
that's right. And you know what? Rumor has it that tonight she's dropping the new recording of Reputation. Um, so we'll find out. And she did all of her little hints, her little Easter eggs.
Oh,
Um, and now very excited about it. But actually I've been listening to Motion City soundtrack. I kind of
oh,
like,
no way.
yeah, those bands where you're like, you love them and then you just go on and listen to other things and you kind of forget that they exist for a little bit. And then you're like, oh my gosh, this band that I've been to like three of their shows, like three times. I haven't listened to them in like however long. So I'm going through that.
Well, that's great because there's so much nostalgic stuff. The older that we get,
Yeah. Yeah.
our the catalog of nostalgia just grows. But that's interesting. What's the they have their big song. It's like I'm on fire now. I think I'm ready because that's their big one. But they have
Yeah.
another
The future
big
freaks
one.
me out. Let's get fucked up and die.
No, that's a
LGFE.
great one too.
Let's see.
Uh, what's
Everything is all right.
yes, that's
Probably.
it.
Yeah.
That comes for some reason. Spotify just like decided I love that song and they put that on like every one of my daily mixes.
It's
But
so good.
no, Motion City soundtrack. There's awesome, and this I've been looking forward to asking this question for as long as since I had the idea of you coming on the podcast because obviously we were probably spoon fed the same music, but what music do you remember being spoon fed as a kid?
Yeah, and it's funny because I think I remember you giving an answer like listening to when you talked about that, and I don't know if they even 100% line up. So definitely the Beatles was a big
Yeah.
one
Yep.
with dad. Yeah. So that I'd say is number one. Um, and then also Josh Groban,
Josh
right? Do you
Groban.
remember?
Okay. Of course I remember Josh Groban. Yeah.
It was like what music dad
Yeah.
liked, and then what CD mom played on repeat in the car for whatever 3 to 6 months that she found that
Yeah.
CD interesting.
Oh, yep. Yep.
Um,
It was,
yeah,
she liked
but I think
yeah.
no, go ahead.
She loves those like big, powerful, ballady singers,
Yeah,
Josh Groban, Celine Dion, of course, Barbara Streisand,
Streisand. Yep,
her all-time
yep,
favorite.
yep. So always the things that you're like, wow, that singer's really good, and then also, wow, now I feel depressed. Um,
Yep.
no, I'm
Yeah,
kidding,
it
but
sounds about right.
yeah, but I feel like what are Beach Boys.
Yep. Yep.
So really, yeah, all that
Yeah,
time.
it's interesting because now that you're saying that, I remember it so well. But when I've talked in the past about the music that we were spoon fed, I forgot about Josh Groban and the Beach Boys. And the Beach Boys, I mean, I can see Josh Groban forgetting that because that was more like we were like in middle school, high school.
Yeah.
But like the Beach Boys, that was, I mean, right when we were probably from kindergarten on, or probably
Hmm.
even before that.
Yeah. Right. Right. Honestly, and funny story from uh when we were like little kids listening to the Beach Boys. Um, there was some, maybe it's the "Wouldn't it be nice," but there's some lyric where he was talking about getting married in the future, but something that implied that they were having sex. And I think I turned to dad and was like, "But dad, they're not married. Like, how is that possible?" or I think I was, or maybe I said to him like, "Wait, are they married?" And he was like, "Oh yeah, no, they are married. They said it earlier in the song or something like that."
It was like when we asked dad. I remember you asked him. We were in the car, and I think we were on like one of like the Brooklyn Bridge or the Mario Cuomo Bridge or whatever. And I remember you asked dad, "Have you ever been drunk?" And he said, once I was at like an oneg at synagogue, and I was really thirsty, and I had a bunch of grape juice, but like it turned out it was wine, and like I felt real drunk and like kind of sick, and I never wanted to do it again. And do you remember your response, what you said to him?
No.
You said, "Wow, I didn't realize you didn't have a life."
It turned out he
Uh,
did have a life. He just was
yeah,
good at. He just used
yeah, he
lying as
was.
a common.
Oh yeah, he was great.
Yeah.
But anyways, so now how did you get? Now I have like my memories of you when you first started discovering music, but when did you start discovering music on your own?
That's a great question. I think branching out from the like listening to what mom and dad had on in the car, then middle school became listening to what CDs my friends were listening to. And back in the day of like looking on iTunes and seeing like, oh, what are some similar songs to this? Um, what I've realized about myself is if you put something in front of me and it's good, I'll typically like it. And so it wasn't until high school that I really started discovering my sound. So middle school was anything from like Chevelle to Simple Plan, and whatever CD I would just like listen to on repeat. And then in high school was then when I started getting into like something corporate and Jack's Mannequin and Brand New and like Panic at the Disco, that type of thing. Um,
Well, I didn't realize you're into Panic at the Disco.
Yeah, I mean, don't tell my wife that because she's like really into them. I'm like I realize even the way I said that, it's like I know the hits and maybe a few beyond that, but like I love them if that makes like, but yeah, no, I do. I love Panic at the Disco. Obviously Motion City's soundtrack, stuff like that. But then also eventually Ben Folds, anything like rock and piano and jazz, that combination. And I think also I would
Did
go
you
through something. Oh yeah, go ahead.
did you get it? Did you like the Fray?
I did like the Fray at the time. It was one of those things where, okay, this is a thing that people are listening to, and oh yeah, this was good. I probably had it on my MySpace page at one point, one of their songs. But I think as like, once, part of my discovery of music too was like what songs could relate to my experience, what I'm going through as like an angsty 16-year-old and finding like lyrics. So sometimes I look to music for music. I like the actual instrumentals. Other times I'm going to it because the lyrics speak to me and I want to make some like angsty, the world is hard at age 17, like, playlist or something like that.
Yeah. Anyways, so let's get into the artist that is the focus of the episode. And just first question, what the fuck does irony mean?
Okay, by the way, I was literally ready to get on this podcast and make some joke about like, oh yes, Alanis Morissette, the singer who ruined grammar for our entire generation. Um, because yeah, I honestly meant to Google irony because I think I'm pretty sure that in like seventh grade, we even had an assignment where they listed all like the lines from Alanis Morissette songs. We had to identify which were actually irony. Um, so I don't know I don't know. She ruined it. I don't know. But I think what her definition of irony is based on her lyrics, which is just like, well, this kind of sucks. I
Yeah.
think that's, or all the timing's kind of bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I read like three different articles about the song Ironic, and I have no better understanding than before I read those three articles of what irony is and whether or not ironic is ironic. So we won't talk much about that. But I remembered you mentioning that when I asked you to do this podcast. Like, oh, I got to ask that question. And when did you first hear of Alanis Morissette?
So this album came out when I was 5. So I think it's like one of those things that I just feel like I always knew these songs because I don't remember hearing them for the first time. But I think it was in high school when I started reconnecting with those songs. It was things that I just listened to on the radio but didn't know what the words meant. And so I remember in late high school and early college actually getting into the album as opposed to just like, oh, I know these songs and they're fun to sing to. And even a friend of mine talking about Head Over Feet, really about like falling in love and having my own You Ought to Know experience. And so I think it was at the age that I could finally relate to the songs that I felt like I was really paying attention.
Yeah, that's and I talk a lot about. I think what impressed me the most about Alanis Morissette is her as a songwriter. It was something I knew she was a good songwriter, but I never really because before this episode I was just more of like a casual listener. But just studying the lyrics was such a great experience because there's so many things I learned about her, and like I mentioned a lot in the podcast, like she doesn't, with a few exceptions, she really doesn't rhyme her lyrics, which I never noticed, and it's like wow, that's a really bold move. And anyways, just an aside, just a note about
Yeah.
that.
Actually, it's funny you say that. Earlier today, I was listening to You Ought to Know, which I
Mhm.
hope we talk about. I'm excited to talk about it if we do. I just love that song so much. But the opening line, where she's like, like I want you to know that I'm happy for you.
Mhm.
I want you to know that I'm happy for you. I wish nothing but the best for you both. Like the way that the song panned out, she could have just said you both times and it wouldn't have been like a cringe kind of, oh, you use the same word. It would have rhymed, but it was like she went out of her way not to rhyme. And also, I think the meaning of including you both was more powerful lyrically, but I was just like, wow, that's so interesting. Um, right out the gate.
And that's a big thing that I also talk about in the episode is that she like when I'm listening to her, I don't feel like she's just kind of communicating how she's feeling about a particular thing. And that's what I really appreciate about her songwriting, which kind of lends itself to what you just mentioned for sure. But I want to know because I would love to talk for 20 minutes or 30 minutes or 2 hours about her songwriting, but um I'm curious to hear, and I wanted to hear your opinions about Jagged Little Pill, because this was the first. I mean, obviously, I knew the hits, and there's so many of them. I knew like half the album, but this was the first time for me really listening through, and it really is just a brilliant album. So for you, what are some of your favorite songs off Jagged Little Pill?
So I won't say I'll get back to my favorite one later, but I think Head Over Feet. I really like that song a lot. I think it's very relatable and just beautiful, like the beautiful to listen to. Um, I like the harmonica, the almost the lazy ease of being with someone who you're head over heels about. So I really like that song. Also, oh, what is it? Unforgiven. or Forgiven.
Forgiven. Yeah, yeah.
Forgiven. Yeah. So I don't love that song, but I love the pre-chorus and the chorus like a lot.
How does that one go again?
That's a great. I'm literally gonna look at it's and I'm be honest, I didn't even really it was when I was like re-listening to that.
Yeah, yeah.
Um let's look it
Yeah,
up.
no, because I'm just like there were certain deep tracks that I really identified with, and I probably listened to those multiple times. Whereas maybe some of the other ones that didn't connect with me, I didn't. I could, if I heard it, I could, I'd obviously recognize it, but just saying the name, I don't really remember it. So my apologies.
Oh no, you're good. And I'm like, it's the one that starts out like oh, excuse me. You know how us Catholic girls can be. Yeah. It's just like really like powerful, the music. Um, but I like I'll tell you what I don't like is Perfect.
Oh, is that the one where like she's just so pitchy?
Yeah,
Yeah, I always skip over that song.
not a
Like that,
fan.
like that's the one song I'm like, oof.
And I get,
Um,
I don't know, is that like the point of it? Is she saying perfectly on purpose?
I don't know. She's so intelligent that probably. Um, but I don't really. That's a great question. But that's for me. I think every album has a skip over, and I think that's the
Mm-hmm.
only skip over. Like, there's no other. There may be some songs on that album that I don't love, but I don't skip over them. But I always skip over Perfect.
Yeah. But yeah, I
Um.
like All I Really Want.
Yep. Yep. I was
The
gonna. I was.
part,
I was literally just about to ask you about that. Yeah.
yeah, I like the part with the silence.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. Can you handle this? And then
Yeah.
just the way she comes back in that crescendo. Did you think
Yeah.
about yeah.
And it's just and
Um,
the her vocals right after that pause are just so Alanis. You know what I mean?
yes, exactly. You can really like it was just a cool like moment, and the way she threw her personality into it was really neat. And then of course, You Ought to Know is
Yeah.
such a banger. I mean, yeah, I love so much about it. It's incredible how she was able to capture that experience, which is honestly, I feel like one of the worst like first world feelings you can have is when
Yeah.
your like ex
Yeah.
moves on and you're not ready for them to move on, and they're happy with someone else. And I just, oh, it's the worst. And I love in the beginning the way that she sings that line that she's so happy, but she's clearly so angry and about to just like pop one. And um yeah, the lyrics are just so good. I think that like the raw, it's like anger and vulnerability, and it almost is like that, just that feeling of you have moved on, but I'm still thinking about you and I can't even control that. And like, I haven't forgotten about us and me. Like, how could you forget about me? And like, I'm here to remind you that I freaking exist and this happened. You said these things. And like, it's just, I just love it.
Yeah,
So good.
yeah, and just full disclosure, I didn't choose that as my, and we'll get to the signature song conversation, but I didn't choose that one, but I did mention that is my favorite song by Alanis Morissette, and it's not even like there's not even a close second.
Yeah.
And I think for me in the right before she goes into I think it's the first pre-chorus, which like how you said you would like love me until you die, but you're still alive. Like, oh my, I don't know why, but just the way she sings that just gets me so fired up.
I love how, yeah, it's like, did you forget about me at what part? And then like you said, that powerful aspect of till you died, but you're still alive and I'm here like to remind you. I feel like where she's like, yeah, I just love it.
Yeah. And then one more thing before we move on is that and every time I scratch my nails down someone's back, I hope you feel it. Like it's just it's great.
It's
It's so it's anger, but like it's relatable anger.
yeah. Oh yeah.
But so when I knew that Jagged Little Pill was like a blockbuster success. Now again, like you mentioned, you were 5 when it came out. I was probably 2, maybe 1, 2 when it came out. So I obviously don't really remember when it came out. Obviously, that album was played on the radio till the end of the millennia. Um but why? But when I was researching it, like I learned that it sold like approximately 30 million copies and is like I think the 12th highest selling album of all time. And so why do you think that album became as successful as it did?
That's a great question. Do you know which single was famous first by chance?
You Ought to Know was the first single.
That's so interesting because um so one, it could be that You Ought to Know is just a classic. And I think for all the reasons that you and I just talked about it, it's incredibly relatable. It's cathartic. Also, and you would know this better than me, like to what extent were women really allowed to be like angry at music at that time? Um, and genuinely, you know the answer. I'm like, I'm not a historian. So what I'm saying might be but it feels like that might have been pivotal a bit.
I was definitely I was thinking a lot about that. You know, and I don't really know the answer to that. That's probably a that'd be a great idea for an episode.
Yeah.
But
But yeah, I think also then, because I found myself thinking about why ironic, which also is a song that I do love. I just didn't say it as well because it just feels so like, I don't know, everyone loves that song. Um, and I don't know why, and that's why I didn't mention it. I'm like, why is this? But I think in some ways her album did something kind of interesting where some of her lyrics had like a dialectical or like duality type of experience. Like you learn, it's like here's the struggle, and then you know, but at the same time you're learning. One hand in my pocket. It's like I'm tired, I'm overwhelmed, like I'm free, but I'm not saying the lyrics correctly, but it's like this positive and negative, and I think that that's relatable just to like the struggle, or just, and I think that also in ironic, have those kinds of experiences. So I'm also kind of curious if something about the album, I guess, maybe just felt really relatable, and the fact that it tapped into like the coexistence of positive and negative at once, and just being a human being was kind of neat.
yeah, for sure, for sure. And I mean, I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this next question, but do you think the album has stood the test of time?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I think, yeah, there's a lot of albums that are like super successful that don't hold up. And listening back to the album, like there was nothing that I think has, aged poorly. I think everything is awesome. And I can't say that about some of our other stuff listening to it. And that's a good segue to this next question. Are there any other songs by Alanis Morissette? I know I sent you that in the anthology that I used for this episode. Was there any other songs by her that you particularly enjoy?
I really like Uninvited.
Yeah. And I mentioned this, but so that was on the soundtrack of City of Angels, which was starring, I think, Nick Cage and Meg Ryan. That was the second biggest song on that movie. You know what the first biggest song on that movie
What?
was Goo Goo Dolls Iris.
Wow.
Yeah. And that's wild because I think like she sold 7 million copies or something wild of that single.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, I mean, Iris is just a.
Yeah, and I know, yeah.
Will that end up on your? I don't. Is that 90s?
Well, that is 90s, but I don't know if Goo Goo Dolls are 90s enough. But TBD on that.
Stay tuned,
And
folks.
what's that?
No, I said stay tuned, folks.
Yeah, and listening to some of our other stuff, like, like, why don't you think any of her other work approximated the level of success of Jagged Little Pill?
That's a great question. I haven't even fully listened to her other stuff, to be honest. Sometimes I've tried listening to a couple albums, but I don't find it striking me as much. Um, I'm a little nervous that what I'm going to say is going to be ignorant because I haven't given all of her music since then a full listen. Um, I think that there was like a vulnerability and a relatability to her, to Jagged Little Pill, and the way that she wrote the lyrics, the way that the music coincided with her singing. And when I hopped around, it felt like in some ways the kind of the classic like rock band drum, that she has a really unique style. And so sometimes I think for me, the mixing, and I'm not anyone to speak on this, it almost felt like her voice was the whole thing, and then the music was there too. And I don't know, it just felt different than maybe something I listened to just singing in the car. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and I think probably that was also she was probably at her most relatable. because obviously she did have, success in Canada, both with her singing, and she did some acting when she was a kid. But still, like, pretty not really that well known, I guess. But like after that, she's just a completely different person. That's probably her most relatable, was what she communicated on that album. Maybe that's another reason. But I totally agree with you. And like I said, some of our other stuff is like pretty good. But I just don't think anything. I just don't think anything was just as good. I mean, that happens to some artists. I mean, there's tons of artists that their debut album is just their best because they have their entire life working on that album. And I know it's not technically her debut, but it's for all intents and purposes. Did you know about her, like, that she like was a pop singer in Canada?
No.
Yeah, you'll there's a you'll when you listen to the monologue, you'll enjoy the opener because I had some context to that. But we are but I want to move on to the last because we don't have too much time.
Can I say one more thing is just, and I hate to say anything negative, not a fair word, but I was listening today to her album, I think from in 2012, the song Empathy. And something that I found myself, I mean, I've just listened to this today and I'm like, I want to think about it more, is why does this song sound so cheesy? The concept is, oh yeah, Havoc and Bright Lights is the album. I just remembered. And it's really nice and about being in love and really being seen and heard and understood. And those, like, when you read the lyrics, I'm like, this is relatable, but something about it in the song just felt so cheesy that it almost made me cringe. And I feel guilty saying that because I love Alanis Morissette. Like, I love Jagged Little Pill. But I almost wonder if there's I think even when you sing about positive things, there's still a vulnerability to it. And I think when something about that vulnerability is missing, then it could come off as cheesy. And so I don't know what wasn't vulnerable, but I don't know. There was something that maybe she was successful. So
Yeah, well, you definitely listened much further than I did. But anyways, because I really didn't get past like 2002 because I was just like, all right, I'm yeah. That was also like her last, I think, like super like mega success. Well, not mega successful album, like her last successful. I think it was her last album that went platinum in the U.S. was the one that came out in 2002. So, the name of this episode, right? What is Alanis Morissette's signature song? And I've done, I don't know, 4 or 5 signature song episodes. And I always ask my guests this question because, we need to establish this before we have the debate or discussion, if you will. But what do you think is a signature song?
in general,
Yeah.
how'd I define it?
Like how would you like when I ask you like what is Alanis Morissette's signature song, like if I said to any artist, like what are some of the factors that would help you determine what is a particular artist's signature song?
Yeah. So I think that the definition of a signature song is not static. I think that a signature song depends on who you ask. So you have the signature song from a standpoint of maybe people who don't listen to Alanis Morissette. I think one definition of signature song is if you were to tell someone who maybe is not really familiar with an artist's music, like, oh, they sing this, and then they go, oh, yes, of course, I know that person. So
Oh, I love that. Yeah, yeah. No, I love that explanation. I've never heard that before. It's a really interesting explanation.
yeah, because I was trying to think to myself how I think there's kind of like 2 definitions. And so it's almost the eye of the beholder, the listener is that example. And then the other is then people who know an artist well. And so I think in a way there's almost like 2 signature songs where one is like, I know that work. And the other is, well, this is actually a signature, a sign off. Like this is her print, like this is that person's handwriting. This song, embodies them.
So it's like for the casual listener and for the actual fan of the artist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like I feel like some signature songs that are like people would know, then the people who actually know the artist would be like, that's not actually it. It's actually that, like that, like a signature song by the layperson could irritate the actual listeners, like if they heard that that's what you're calling it, the signature song.
Right. It's like if you tell a hardcore Nirvana fan that Smells Like Teen Spirit. I mean, I know this was our first episode
Yes.
that Smells Like Teen Spirit signature song, or like a hardcore Oasis fan that it's Wonderwall, you know. Um they might have some choice words for you. So yeah, I hear that. But with that being said, so did you choose one signature song or two?
Uh, Two. I chose. I mean, it's probably ironic. Um, I want it to be "You Ought to Know," but I think it's if there were the two definitions, I'd say ironic and then "You Ought to Know." That's on my bias is just like I want "You Ought to Know" to be the signature song, but the footprint of ironic I think is too big. It from that definition. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really fun, and I talk about this a little bit in the monologue, but I feel like with a few Alanis Morissette songs, like, really speaks that she really is a cultural phenomenon because two of her songs had people debating about, ironic was the debate was, is this actually ironic? And You Ought to Know, there was the debate and the questioning, like, who is this man that hurt Alanis so much, you know? But yeah, that's really interesting. I really I struggle, and I talk about it. It took me 2 months to figure out what the signature song would be, and I couldn't, because her music is so diverse. It's like I feel like certain artists you can kind of like pick out, okay, this is something that they do it a lot, and then just kind of find the song where they do it the most. Obviously still needs to be a popular song and acclaimed. And that was, pretty easy to do with Radiohead, and Nirvana and Oasis was a little challenging. But I think Alanis Morissette was just so difficult because even like on Jagged Little Pill, you have songs like You Ought to Know, which is like grunge. Then you have Ironic, which is like, soft rock. And then you have songs like Hand in My Pocket and Head Over Heat, which is like folk rock. So it's like, what even is her signature sound? So that's why it was really challenging for me. But I would agree with you, but I would disagree with, I would choose You Ought to Know over Ironic for the layman, for the casual listener. Yeah, and I think that obviously Ironic is more popular in terms of like if you look at its success in the US on the charts, and like it has more streams on Spotify, but I think that if I asked a casual fan, name me an Alanis Morissette song, I think that they would say You Ought to Know. I think that's more associated with her. And then Ironic is just kind of like part of the zeitgeist, like it's its own entity, if you will.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
But so from the casual listener, but for the Alanis, after like doing all the analysis and all like the nerdy, stuff, I would say that Hand in My Pocket's her signature song.
Yeah. Yeah. Honestly, as you were talking, I was thinking, Hand in My Pocket or Head Over Feet. I think that they speak to her sound more. I don't know. I guess what's your reason? I should say before I tell you my reason for your choice.
Yeah. So Hand in My Pocket, the reason I chose it, I mean, obviously it had a lot of different components that I noticed in some of her other songs. But what I really noticed is that I think that my argument in Jagged Little Pill is that Jagged Little Pill made Alanis Morissette like, on like the top tier of singer-songwriters, up there with Bob Dylan and Joan Baez and Joni Mitchell and, all those kinds of people. And so I think that that's kind of just stands out to me. That's just the most singer-songwriter-esque song on the album, in my opinion. And the songwriting is just amazing there. Like it's the depth of it is really is very impressive. And like I love that last line, and like what it all comes down to is that no one's really got it all figured out just yet, because I got one hand in my pocket and the other one's hailing a taxi cab.
Yeah.
And I just think that's like the perfect way to end the song. And like you were saying earlier, that song just really showcases really effectively the paradoxes of young adulthood.
Yep.
It's like you are the best you'll ever be, and you're making money, but it's also like the most complicated time.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So I just thought the way that she communicates that through all those like really funny contradictions is just super interesting and is just speaks to her talent as a songwriter. So yeah, that's my not that I put any thought into that, but
Just off the cuff.
yeah, just off the cuff. But so yeah, that's my reasoning. What about what are your thoughts on that song?
No, I agree. I think it's a great song, and I think it's really relatable, like extremely relatable. And so I think it makes sense to be her signature song. I think the music also connects to other songs that she's written there and other albums. So it also just like I think it encapsulates her and definitely is that relatable experience.
Yeah, definitely. What do you think about You Learn?
Yeah.
I know we talked a little bit about it, but because I would say like for me of all of like her because I think she released like 6 singles from that album, either 5 or 6, and like for me that was always the one I like the least. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that there's certain ones where you're like, okay, is this mildly cheesy? I think it's a good song. Like it's something where if she were to talk about the concept of this song, it's neat. And even, I just pulled up the lyrics, looking at them. It's like, okay, you live, you learn, like it's
Mhm.
it's a nice message of what we get from the pain, which is probably she was probably learning a lot at this point in her life. And I think in young adulthood, a lot of us are learning, and learning never stops as we get older. Life is hard. And we grow from it. And I think but the vulnerability is not totally there, where it's kind of like that's like the band-aid of the positive message. And I feel more of the learn than the like the cry, lose, bleed, scream, even though the song is called You Learn, right? But I think
Mm-hmm.
it leans a little too much into the positive, where I need to feel the vulnerability more to feel more connected listening to it. But I do like the song, to be clear, but I think that's why I don't like it as much as, You Ought to Know, or even Head Over Feet feels vulnerable.
Yeah, definitely. And I yeah, and that's what I love about Alanis Morissette. She's not afraid to get vulnerable. But I feel like the vulnerability connects in a way with a kind of positive message that to me is just like super endearing and heartwarming. And I think that I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. That lack of vulnerability kind of makes it seem a little bit disingenuous.
Mm-hmm.
Which is really, that's something I identify with Alanis. Oh, because I identify her as like a super genuine artist.
Yep.
So I totally hear you on that point. The last question that I want to ask, and I was thinking about this too, and I don't know if I have a particular answer, but have you noticed her influence on other artists?
I think about Paramore.
Interesting.
Possibly, and honestly, I'm not good at connecting the dots between, like I'm not the person to answer this question, but I think about Paramore, I think about Flyleaf,
Yeah. Just kind of like those like the
and kind of the raspy anger.
what was you say? So like rock bands fronted by a woman that kind of has that like is not afraid to get to show her raw emotions.
Yeah. Yes. Um, which I love that.
Yeah.
Um,
It's so funny because I kind of went the complete opposite way. To me,
hmm,
like it reminded me of like, Jewel and Vanessa Carlton and Sheryl Crow,
yes.
just those very like I think it's also just because they're all like are singer-songwriters, but they kind of have like because obviously Alanis Morissette did have the grungy songs, but a lot of her songs are like more like gravitate more towards pop. So that's kind of maybe and like also songs like Can in My
Hmm.
Pocket and You Learn like that have more of like a pop tradition, kind of like that kind of late 90s early 2000s like female singer songwriter ethos, if you will. Kind of reminded me of that a little bit, especially like more not on Jagged Little Pills much, but like on her like next couple albums.
Yeah, I agree. They're more polished.
Yeah.
I
um
think maybe because like Vanessa Carlton, I think that maybe at the time there weren't as many like the part of her of Jack Little Pill that felt unpolished, even like with the music and her vocals like feeling more raw in certain situations. I think maybe that's what distinguishes her from more pleasant sounding
right.
artists. And so I think that's what stands out to me. Although the weird thing is then also I think about Billie Eilish a little bit with just that voice, that like pretty raspy, like the opening to Ironic, like that element. So yeah, we just wanted, it's like we captured different parts of what makes Alanis Morissette is that she really embodies both of those pieces.
Oh yeah. And it really, I mean, I think like, just going back to the singer-songwriter, I think that's like emblematic of a singer-songwriter. Like they're supposed to be representatives of the human experience. And like, you're never just going to be only angry. You're never just going to be only, feeling like reflecting on positive things or whatever. So like, she just really embodies the spirit of the singer-songwriter. So I think that's kind of, in our discussion, we've really honed in on that.
Yeah. I also would like to think Taylor Swift, of course.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I mean, singer-songwriter.
Yeah. I mean,
they're both really talented.
I mean, they're both synonymous with the term. So
the greats.
Yes.
Did you see that Taylor Swift was named Times Person of the Year?
Yeah, I told you that about.
Oh, that's right. You said that earlier. Sorry. It's been a long day.
Yeah,
I've been all excited to talk to you about that all day. Obviously, we could talk about that outside of your podcast.
Well, I'll text you my my response to that. But listen, like I said, she's at Beatle status right now. So that's that's all the questions I have for you. Rachel, sister, thank you so much. And hopefully this was a lot of fun. Hopefully you will come back on the podcast and we can maybe I know you did a fantastic job, but maybe we can talk about an artist that you might have been into for many years. So
yeah, when you hit the 2000s, I know that's outside this podcast, but maybe I got some 90s bands.
No, we'll get you on for Backstreet Boys versus NSYNC.
Oh, I'm ready to go.
All right,
ready to go for that.
All right, thanks, Rach.
It'd be me versus Michael.
Oh God. All right. All right. Have a good one.
You too.
Thanks, y'all, so much for listening. I want to give a special thanks to my sister, Dr. Rachel Brenner, for being a fabulous guest. Y'all have a great rest of your day, and whatever it brings, hopefully music is involved. I'm Dove Brenner, and this is Hot Cakes from a 90s Stand. Take care.